It's the SDG Podcast. Before we get started, you can check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com/podcast or find us on all the social medias, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Solution Design Group. All right, we're back for another podcast. Podcasters, say hello and introduce yourselves, if you could.
Hey, I'm Chad Jetner.
Peter Lawrence.
And I'm Cal Bacher, and today we have a few very special guests to talk about board games. We have Brian Ganis. Did I pronounce that right?
You did. Well done.
Nice. And Lex Ryan
is
with us. And I've seen pictures of Lex's basement, and he's got gaming tables, and it's like a library of board gaming. And then Brian runs our board game community at SDG, which I have not been to. I did walk through one of them because I was still here, and I said hi and tried to make a smart remark or something. But we're going to talk about board games and about learning board games and training people to play board games, all sorts of stuff. So where I kind of want to start is like getting into what kind of board games we're talking about. So I know I played a lot of Uncle Wiggily, Chutes and Ladders, Trouble, Battleship. These are not those types of board games.
It can be, but there's such a deeper rabbit hole to dive into if you really want to.
You guys even own those games? Own normal Parker Brothers games?
I've purged them all.
We do have a couple young kids, and they gotta start somewhere, right? There's
them hooked early.
Where you start talking to somebody who's like, "Oh yeah, I'm into board games. We have like 5. We play like Monopoly and Sorry and Catan." And I'm like, "Oh, honey, have a seat. Let me tell you." Because we've just for background on me, I have a literal degree in game design and development, for whatever that's worth. My basement is lined with a couple hundred board games of all shapes and sizes. And so it's like, Catan is what we kind of consider a gateway game in the deeper end of the pool. It kind of starts pulling people into what's out there.
And Catan is the Settlers of Catan or something Correct. Like that?
Yep.
Probably the cool kids call it just Catan. So
I know, but
we'll get you there,
the
Peter.
Rest of our podcast audience that are uninformed.
So that's a real degree you can get is in game design? Board game design.
Technically video game, but a lot of times you start with a physical prototype anyways.
Okay. Did you get that here in Minnesota? Or
Yep.
I went to clown college, but that was in a strip mall, and it closed immediately after I was finished. I was the only attendee. Maybe it was an abandoned mall, and I was just goofing around. Anyway, kind of describe like today's board games, like the ones you guys play. Like what differentiates them? Maybe the different types. What's beyond Catan?
I'll let Brian speak of his own opinion, but for me, I feel like back in the day, there only were those basic board games. Somewhere in the last decade or so, there was kind of like a burst of popularity, and things like Kickstarter came to light. In Kickstarter, you can do anything you want, any kind of project. People can come in and fund you. But for whatever reason, it's like the go-to hub for board games. It just kind of became the thing. Because when you make a game for Target, it has to be cheap components, has to target a general audience. But when you have Kickstarter, you can target very, very specific people who are willing to give you a lot more money for a much more premium product. Like my wife and I will spend a couple $100s on one board game, because you get, miniatures and like really high quality cards and plastic and, vinyl mats and things like that. So there are games that take hours. We set them up on our gaming table downstairs and leave them up for a week because too much work to take it all the way down.
To me, the kind of one of the biggest differentiators that I have seen is that those games that you're describing earlier, Sorry and Trouble, those kinds of games, they were designed to get families to sit around the table and, enjoy each other's company for an hour or so and sort of just have an activity to do as opposed to just trying to figure out what to talk about for an hour. The games are usually far more luck-based. You roll a die, you move that number of spaces, and you just do whatever the game tells you. There's usually not a ton of decision-making, not a lot of autonomy as a player. You kind of just are there experiencing what the game has doled out for you, whereas the new wave of all these games coming out is really more about embracing the strategy behind some of these games and your interactions with other players and really kind of enveloping you in the experience as opposed to just an activity that you drill through for an hour. To me, I think that's the biggest thing in my mind.
Are there any new modern games that are, you guys are talking long-term experience and very fun and getting together with a group more than once, but are there any of these new games that are sort of either have a quick hit version or something like that?
Sure. So here's a metaphor for you I was thinking of earlier. a lot of people look at something like cartoons, say, oh, cartoons are for kids, right? And they kind of write them off. But the reality is, sure, you've got like your Baby Shark or your 2-year-old, but then on the other end of the spectrum, there's South Park. There's tragedy and horror and comedy and like everything you can think of. And games are no different. There are games that take like 3 minutes to play, and there are games that take hours. There are games with lots of pieces. There are games that are easy to learn, difficult to master, or the opposite. Whatever suits your fancy, there's a game for someone.
Nice.
I think even to add to that, you can buy multiple versions of the same game now that are designed to target different audiences.
Yeah.
So one of my absolute favorite board games, probably my favorite, is called Evolution. The game is where you basically are raising several species of animal, and your job is to out-eat the other animals on the table, the other species on the table. And you do that by acquiring different traits and trying to out-evolve each other to be the most productive species. They have made a version of the game called Evolution: The Beginning, which is targeted at a much younger audience. It's a much faster style of play. I think the core game is rated to be about an hour long. This one can be done in about 15, 20 minutes if you really go through it. So we've identified that there are people who want complexity and there are people who want simplicity. They just want kind of that old experience, like playing Sorry or Trouble. And you can do it with maybe just a touch.
But some of those,
I buy into that because I don't get into a lot of these, but previous gig, one of the kids brought in this game. I had to look it up before we started talking, called Donner Dinner Party. Do you guys know it?
I've not played that one, but I've heard really good things about it.
It is amazing. And it literally took like 3 minutes to figure out the rules.
Yep.
And basically you've got to find the cannibal, right? I think that was the
okay. So it's based on the Donner Party situation where their wagon got stuck and they had to resort to cannibalism.
Thanks for the history lesson, Kyle. Yes. It was, but the game mechanics, and I think Lex was talking about this yesterday when we were prepping, but like, it was so simple, and especially, and it was catchy for kind of a grumpy old guy like me that doesn't really want to get into all of these new things. So it caught me immediately. We had a blast. We played it at lunch at my previous gig, and more than one time, we just ended up blowing off the rest of the day and just doing that. It is amazing. And social, like you're talking about, Brian.
So there are some dangers to this, is what you're saying, Chad. You could end up playing your whole day away.
The calculus, the good outweighs the bad here. By a lot.
So, did you guys in the past do lunchtime gaming and that kind of thing?
I know it was a thing when I actually started at my first client with SDG. There was a group of people who would meet and they would try and play some games over the lunch hour. It was starting to kind of fade right when I joined, so I unfortunately wasn't able to make it to any of them. But it was cool to see that was happening and something that I really wish I could have gotten in more of.
I've had a couple clients. Say that again, Lex.
So I'm too new for that. I wasn't here for any of that.
Okay. Yeah, I had a couple of clients that just some of the client folks would have a game and bring it in and we'd play it over lunch. And it was kind of a nice break and a little bit, you don't take your thinking cap off, but you twist it a little bit and think about something else other than code.
A lot of the best kind of lunchtime games that you would want to play are ones like what Chad is describing, where it's really more about a more guided social experience. Like you are there to still chat with your friends and have fun. You're not necessarily playing a game so much as you're just taking on a role and kind of working with that through this conversation. It's something to do other than just sit there and have completely unguided conversation.
Right. So we've got games that are, 2 players maximum, like my wife and I for a nice chill evening, glass of wine, play a game. We've also got games that are 8 players plus, which are those kind of usually social style games where you sit down with a bag of chips and some beers and friends and figure out, who's a cannibal.
Well, and then there's games. Lex, I don't know if you played 2 Rooms and a Boom. That's a big one. So that's one. I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but I would say you need 20 people to successfully, enjoyably play that game. The whole idea with that one is you've got one person is the president, one person is an assassin, a bomber, something like that. And you're each on one of 2 teams. The goal is the assassin wants to have, by the end of the game, the assassin should be in the same room as the president for them to win. And conversely, the president wins if they are not in the same room at the end. And you all take on roles. The only one that I specifically remember, because this is the one I got, was the drunk, where you are allowed to say anything you want, but it must be a lie.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, it's those can be really tremendously fun games, but you can have a group of, 50 people could be playing that together, and it'll only take 20, 30 minutes if you really wanted to. But yeah, there's something out there for every situation and every person.
Speaking of which, we're talking a lot about social deduction. That's just one of many mechanics. There's a handful, couple dozen maybe types of mechanics, and games are essentially just remixes of those same mechanics. So sometimes people are surprised, how do you know 200 board games, Lex? I'm like, really? It's the same few mechanics, just in different ways. It's like when I look at a rule book, it's more just like, okay, how does this game do the thing? So social deduction is one thing. Set collecting is another. Like you're trying to get a set of certain things. Or engine building, where you're basically putting down one thing that does another thing, and you slowly build up this machine. Or worker placement is one where you have like 5 little tokens and you place them on the board that do things, then you collect them all back and do it again, and you try to do it more efficiently than other players. There's area control, where you have like dudes on a map, as they call it, and you're trying to control as much territory as possible, like Risk in a way, but usually better in modern games. So like if you try one game, you think, oh man, board games aren't for me. You just need to keep like trying or until you learn about yourself what you like. Over the years, my wife and I have really, really figured out what we're both good at and what we like. She'll destroy me at a worker placement game, but I will kick her butt at chess. Very different mechanic and genre. Knowing that about yourself is explosive.
And there are people who can help that too. There are a lot of people who know a very large catalog of games, and if you give them a rough idea of, here's what I like about the games that I've played, here's what I don't like about other games I've played, it becomes way easier to steer you towards some recommendations. And other pieces of information, if you don't want to, you want the game to only take 20 minutes max, that's a really important piece of information, because it removes a large chunk of games, but it opens up a whole new set of other ones that you might not think to look for in a store. So any information you can provide will help.
I do that a lot for people. People will ask me that type of stuff, and I'm like, well, I got a whole slew of ideas for you. But for my part, there's also a website, BGG, or BoardGameGeek.com, that I use quite frequently. You can go on the forums there and just like, hey, I like XYZ. Is there any games like that? And then people will just view ideas, and you can go try them out. Mm-hmm. Great.
Is there, like, you have this huge collection of games, Lex. Yeah. Is there, you buy games and then you play them, and after a while you want to move on to something else. Is there a big trading community out there?
Oh, yeah. And it's actually amazing. Usually when like trading on Facebook or Craigslist or however you do it, there's always kind of like a shady element to it. But like every time we've ever traded a game, it's always come like pristine. The cards are sleeved, everything is great condition. Because I feel like the types of people that trade in this field are also just the same level of like nerd and meticulous care. And so yeah, it's we trade for stuff all the time.
Also maintain their value. If you go to the Facebook group for Minnesota and you go try and buy a used game, you're really not going to end up saving much money. They'll maybe be somewhere between $5 and $10 cheaper off of a $50 or $60 game. So you're not really saving any money by buying used, but like Lex said, you might end up buying this game slightly cheaper than you would get it in the store, but all the components are punched out of the cardboard for you. The cards are sleeved. Like they maybe added little notes to something. You can actually end up with a better experience by buying off of a meticulous person because of that. Yep. But yeah, they maintain their value, and some even gain because they go out of print. So a very popular game, one of my absolute favorites, Battlestar Galactica, the board game. The company that makes that game lost the license to the Battlestar universe. They have reskinned the game, so it's now available under a different license, essentially. But if you can find someone selling a shrink-wrapped version of the Battlestar board game, $200-$300 easy, and people are paying it and buying them.
Actually got one recently where everything was sleeved and they came in deck boxes, and they had like custom scenarios like designed and printed off with like really nice Photoshop and graphics. I'm like, dude, this is like $50 plus of extra material. Great.
So sleeved are little plastic sleeves for the cards to go into to keep them pristine and things like that.
Yep.
So like, is this a random card I have that's sleeved?
So is that a Magic card? Is that a land? Yeah. Is that an island?
Yep. Good call.
I played Magic. So is Magic the Gathering, games like that, those are card games. Are those kind of in the same, would you play those in your community? Like, is that part of that, I guess? Or is that a whole different thing?
I feel like there is this artificial divide between board games, tabletop games, and card games. I think the card gaming community, due to what it is, because a lot of the earlier games like Magic, they were called customizable card games. And the idea behind them was, you start with a starter set of, say, 100 cards, whatever it is, and then you add to it by buying the booster packs, and you customize your own deck. And when you find a really, really great card, you get 4 copies of them in a Magic deck, for instance. And so you are now spending money to find more copies of the same card just so your deck will be more powerful. And I feel like it kind of created this divide a little bit where it attracts collectors, it attracts very hardcore strategic players, and they tend to gravitate toward card games, I think. With that said, there are ways to find games like this that are very approachable. Magic the Gathering has this amazing system where you can buy what are called dual decks. It's 2 decks that are pre-configured. They're meant to play against each other and kind of complement one another and give you the full experience of the game. You don't have to worry about deck building. You don't have to
that's really
buy your own
nice.
packs. They're incredible. I own probably 10 sets of the dual decks because I really like the game, but I don't want to spend thousands of dollars customizing a deck. So it's a great way to approach it. But yeah, there is this kind of divide with card games that I feel like is there. It doesn't need to be, but I feel like it's there. I tend to find that the people who really enjoy tabletop games usually don't get into card games as much, and a little bit on the vice versa, on the flip of that. But yeah.
Okay.
So is Pokemon, and just basing on my own family experience, Pokemon being a younger generation, is that the younger generation Magic? Is it just the forever kid version of Magic? Or
I mean, there are adults that play Pokemon competitively.
Sure.
And their decks are ridiculous.
Yeah.
But you're probably right. When I was a kid, I played Pokemon until I was a teenager, and then I migrated to Yu-Gi-Oh! Until I was an adult, and then I migrated to Magic. It's kind of like a step process.
The normal, path. Ryan, you're running the board game community here at STG, and I know we talked a little bit about that. So can you give me a high level description?
Yeah. So it spun off of, we had I think it was just called the tabletop community. And what it was really more focused on was RPG type games like Dungeons and Dragons. And it sounds like there was kind of enough of a demand that we actually created a separate, I forget, I apologize what the actual community is called, but it's a community much more focused on RPGs like Dungeons and Dragons. And then we spun off this tabletop community as well, which is really more focused on just the concept of board gaming and tabletop gaming in general. So what we have been really trying to focus on is introducing people to new games and kind of bringing you out of what you already know and showing you what else is out there. So we've done, I think, 3 or 4 events already this year, and each one has been centered around teaching a new game. So we try to make sure that there's at least 1 or 2 of us who are knowledgeable about how the game is played. We set up multiple copies of it, and anyone can come and learn it. It's a low pressure environment where we'll try, like specifically, we try to get people who don't know the game to all sit together, because then no one is going to feel rushed to go through it or anything like that. So that's been our big goal, is just sort of kind of broadening people's understanding of what these games are, giving you a comfortable environment in which you can learn it, and hopefully, if you enjoy it, coming back to learn a completely different style of game the next month.
That's always been the kind of the overhead. I know when my family would get new games, like there would always be this lead up to learning the rules and figuring out how to play it. And that would cause like a lot of tension and issues, and it kind of ruined game night. It was when you had LAN parties in the old days, you play computer games, you'd spend 90% of the time getting everything working.
Right.
So I know that like the more complex these games are, the more complex the rules get. Is that so? How do you quickly get people up to speed?
Like I said before, it's kind of a collection of mechanics. It's not, a lot of times something can seem really intimidating. I'll sit down on a new game sometimes with like a friend who's teaching me. I'm like, oh man, I'm not sure I'm up for this right now. But by the time we get through like the first round and they've explained everything, it clicks. But I'm also very experienced in this, so they can tell me this game is a set collecting, worker placement, blah, 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 blah. And I instantly have an idea how to play the game, and they haven't even told me a single rule yet. So it's, if I'm with people who know what they're doing, you can give those kinds of terminology and things will ping on pretty quick. Brand new people, you have to slow down a little bit and just kind of give them focus on a mechanic and like, this is how this works. Typically, here's how it works in this game, and just kind of go through step by step, phase by phase, turn by turn.
There's been a lot of like memes on the internet about this, because there's jokes about, oh, it's time to sit down for game night, and you spend 6 hours learning how the game works, and then you spend 20 minutes playing it, and because everybody has to go home. And avoiding that trap is a challenge, because some of these games get very complex. They have long rule books that have a lot of reading you have to kind of get up to speed on. It can be really tricky. The best thing to do is, if you are going to introduce a new game, is try and be familiar with it yourself so that you can try and help guide people through it. I think a lot of people, myself included, are learn by doing types who they don't want to sit down and read a rule book. They just want to be taken through the experience and shown how it works. Specific questions will come out later, and that's okay. I know a lot of people kind of have a soft rule. The first time you play a game doesn't count because it's basically just a trial run.
Right.
I know another thing that's been really popular, and it's amazing that this is happening. Many games now will come with a QR code that you see right on the first page of the instruction book, and it leads you to a YouTube video that explains how to play the game. And they're somewhere between 5 to 15 minutes long usually. Those can be a really great way to get a summary and just sort of a quick start into the game. And then as specific individual questions start coming up, you can delve into the rule book to answer those. But they're usually videos produced by the company themselves. They get people who really understand how to teach the art of these games in an effective and concise way. And that's been a really popular trend that's been developing. And I hope we continue to see more of it, because those videos are amazingly helpful.
So when you're going to have an event, you pick the games ahead of time, and do you ever like send out links to those tutorials in advance so that people can kind of get some idea, so they're not walking in completely cold when I come to the next one?
I haven't done that, and I suspect it's for the main reason of, I think most people aren't going to bother to watch it anyway. And the people like you, Kyle, who do want to watch it, you're going to go find that video whether I send a link or not.
Sure. To that end, I highly recommend Watch It Played by Rodney Smith. First time I saw that guy, I thought his smile and demeanor was so obnoxious, but after a couple of videos, it just became endearing. And the guy explains things so well, like so well.
Go ahead, Peter.
Is there a concept of sort of learning card games, for example? You play open-handed or whatever, so that the adults can teach the kids, or the adults can teach the adults. Do you guys have a sense of that in some of these games as well?
Yeah. My wife can be really competitive, so sometimes like we're learning a game for the first time and a rule comes up in the middle of the game. She's like, well, I would have done this differently if I knew that. And I'm like, hey, remember, it's just our first play. I'm figuring it out too as we go. Like Brian says, it doesn't really count the first time. You just, like sometimes I did tell you this rule, 15 minutes ago, but I didn't expect you to hold all of it in your head immediately, So it's just, a lot of times we'll just like, okay, here, just show me the card. Okay, well, let's suss it out together, and then we'll like reshuffle, draw a different one, or go with it, or as long as the table's having fun.
Do you ever change the rules to simplify it for people if it's just going to be a one-day thing? Yeah. Like, oh, we're not going to worry about this piece of it here because that takes a long time. And
a lot of games actually bake that into their rule books as well. They start with a core set of rules that you should follow to really experience the game. And then they have a whole second section of the rule book that's basically, now you know the basics. Here's the advanced stuff you can choose to get into. Often with it's a la carte. You can pick this and this, but not this. To jump into. So even the game designers are very aware of this, and they are trying to accommodate multiple audience types. Peter, I wanted to jump back to your question as well, in that one of the things I do when I'm teaching a game, if there are cards involved, I will always volunteer, especially when there's kids. I will volunteer. I always play open-handed, and I over-narrate everything I'm doing.
Yes.
Probably gets a little annoying at times, but I want to call out and say things like, I'm using this card because it does this. I'm not using this card because, and I'll go into an explanation, because my thought is they might have that exact same card in their hand, And now I've answered a question for them without them having to point out that they have it. So they still get to play in kind of the private secret way while I'm just over narrating and giving more information that they can hopefully, absorb and make a decision based on that. So definitely lots of ways to customize how you're approaching things. But yeah, typically open-handed play and just over narration, that's usually the easiest way to handle it.
Do you lose when you play open-handed, or?
No, never.
Speaking of all this, learning, if you've made it this far in the podcast and you're not a board game fan, you must have some level of curiosity. And this will be especially true if you're a leader or like a manager of people. But you should absolutely go out, find a game you like, learn it, and teach it to others. It is an invaluable leadership experience, and teach it to multiple groups. You'll find very different learning styles, and you'll learn more about yourself and how you present the information and better ways to organize it, and you'll learn a lot.
It's interesting to take that into the workplace.
Yeah, like as part of your training for something else, you're going to start with like, let's play this game for an hour so that I can learn how you guys, your style and what's working and kind of who's in my training class. And then we can, like, does that ever translate, like the game itself, does that ever translate to a work situation? Like, is there any value to playing these games other than having a blast?
Yeah, I mean, again, not only is it educational to the person teaching it, but then the people playing it as well. The people teaching it, they learn about, like you said, about the learning styles and habits of their players, but they also learn about themselves and how they present the information and how they can tweak it. And, they learn things as they go. Like, I'm sure Brian didn't start at the very beginning with playing open hand and doing this and that. He learned those things as he taught people. So you become a better instructor and thus a better leader when you do that. And then, if you play like a cooperative or a team game, you can start to build the camaraderie and rapport between teammates from the very beginning.
Yeah, maybe it gets people to open up a little bit.
I'm an introvert. I walked into SDGs the first time a while back. And I'm like, I don't know any of these people. I'm going to stay in the corner because I don't know what's going on. But like, if we all sat down and you kind of play a game or something, you push through that a little bit faster, you break the ice. The reason icebreakers exist, it's the same concept.
Is there a game called IT Guy?
Probably.
I mean, there's games for there's some of the big ones that were popular in the last 2 or 3 years. There were games based entirely around the idea of starting up your own brewery, for instance.
Yeah.
So, I mean, board games are just following societal trends. If there's something popular happening right now, there will be a board game about it in the next 1 or 2 years.
Yeah,
guaranteed.
Interesting. So if you always win the startup brewery game every time you play, does that mean you should go start a brewery because you've got it all down now?
Honestly, I can't imagine any other conclusion. So, yeah.
Nice.
Is there a game called Happy Hour Meat Raffle?
If there isn't, I'm going to make one. It sounds fun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, like, we have a
I'm
game
definitely going to
called-
show up at the next board game event. Is there any games to avoid if you're just starting out? Any types of games that are, or mechanics, things like that people can kind of go, maybe I won't buy this one as my starting game?
I think the easiest thing you can do, so if you look at the box of most of these more advanced games now, they usually include 3 really important pieces of information directly on the box. It'll tell you how many people it plays, what age you should be minimum to learn it, and then how long a game typically takes. Search out, if you're brand new, seek out a game that says, 30 minutes max, because there's just only so much complexity you can bake into a game that takes a half hour. There are other games out there. Twilight Imperium is like the classic example. So this game takes, you're talking an hour of setup for the game alone. You're not even playing yet. That's just getting the table ready to go. I think the game itself can take between 6 and 12 hours. 6 is if you really know what you're doing. Just by looking at the box and seeing 6 hours minimum, you know to stay away from that game as your first attempt. So that would be my first one. My biggest piece of advice is just look for one that says, usually 1 or 2 players is a great kind of sweet spot to start with as well. Look for one that says a half hour or less.
Yeah, and I would say, at the very beginning, I referred to Catan as a gateway game, because it very much is. It fits into that common target category, like it's there next to Monopoly, but it's also it's very much a Euro, which is a style of game. So like if you get into Catan, you're like, this is, I have more interest in exploring this, then you can kind of branch out from there.
What did you call it? A Euro?
A Euro, yeah. So there's 2 like primary like categories of games, right? There's Euro and there's Ameritrash. That's just what it's called. A Euro game is kind of like before games were popular in the US. It started more in like Germany. Like there's what the hell is it called? Something Spiel. There's a game convention that happens there. It's huge every year in Germany. So like back in the day, we had Sorry and whatnot when we were kids, but there was always in the Europe, they have games like World War II economic politics, like you're moving little cubes around the board, and a lot of times Euros have like little wooden pieces. They're very simple design. There's like Power Grid. I think of the names off the top of my head, but there's all kinds. But they're mostly, I don't want to say boring, but the theme is usually
sounds really boring.
It's not something you'd probably pick up and be like, oh, this is, but the thing that's like Rambo on the cover, that's probably Ameritrash.
Yeah. The Euro games they're very strategic. They don't usually involve a lot of player to player interaction. It's kind of just you unleashing your own strategy and trying to do better than everyone else at the table. It's usually all based around just how many points do you get by the end of the game. But they can be incredibly educational. Like Lex referenced Power Grid. It's a game where it's an economics game where you are buying the materials to fuel power plants and basically out supply your competitors in a capitalist market. It's a very heavy strategy game, but you can also play it ridiculously. The first time I ever played it, I didn't want to get involved in the economics lesson. I just said, I'm going all nuclear. That's all I'm going to do. And that's all I did. So even when it completely hurt me strategically, I just played ridiculously. Well, I came in second place because it turns out I had a monopoly on the nuclear market. So I learned something anyway, which I was really upset about by the end. But yeah, that's kind of a Euro game in essence. Very heavy strategy, usually a kind of an educational application of the theme is what I would describe them as. And they can be boring in that sense, but they're very strategic. And if you really, really want to think while you play your game, a Euro game is a great option.
Personally, theme matters a lot to me. So like we have one my wife loves called Sagrada. You roll dice and you have to put them down in various patterns. The theme is you're building a stained glass window. So the colored dice are to go in the slots. So like that's building a stained glass window. Really, God, it's so boring. If it was like making a dragon or something, I'd be all for it. But I just can't get over the fact that it's building a window. I need to fight zombies or something.
Yeah.
So can you guys give us? So like I said, I played Donner Dinner Party and Cribbage, and I'm currently annihilating P-Court in chess. Right. That's it though. That's my palette for game. What should I start with? What should be my next thing? Like what's gonna like get me into the hobby and like blow my mind?
My thoughts in that same kind of vein. One Night Ultimate Werewolf, another social deduction.
He's getting killed. Sorry.
And if you like chess, one of my favorites of all time, if you like chess, it's called Onitama, Onotima, player only strategy game. It's very good.
Goes beyond just basic chess moves or Go or something like that, where you get
so the way
further
Onitama works. Onitama, you have I believe it's a 5x5 grid, so it's a really small board.
Wow.
You've got a one masterpiece and a couple like pawn pieces, and then you have two cards in front of you that tell you how your pieces can move. Like you can only move forward and to the left, and that's it. And once you pick one of those cards and make that move, you pass the card you used to the other player, and they have two cards of their own, and whichever one they use, they pass to you. So you're constantly cycling the total of 5 options at any given time, one that's sitting out and 2 that are currently in use. So then the next turn, you don't have that card you just played, so you can't move a guy forward and left. You have to do some other move. So it's kind of like chess, except your pieces are always changing the rules. It's not a knight always moves 2 forward and 1 over. No. It's varied.
It does this round, but next round it's something else, huh?
Right. And there's a stack of 30 cards, and you only use 5 per game, so every single game will be different.
Right.
Wow. That sounds small, convenient, and different and exciting. Kind of a nice change.
Amazing 2-player game.
I think, Chad, what I would want to throw back at you is, first of all, what kind of game do you want to learn? Do you want to learn a chess alternative next? Or do you want to try and capture the same spirit of the Donner Dinner Party?
Donner Dinner Party. So here's what I would like, right? I don't know if you guys knew this, but I'm a huge fan of dive bars. I would like a game that I can bring with me. And this is what cribbage really brings. I have a cribbage board, bring it to the dive bar. I could play cribbage all night with random strangers, right? Because they recognize the game and recognize me.
This is Minnesota.
So something like that I can bring in somewhere and catchy, instant, and maybe a little bit social.
So what I would immediately throw out to you, Lex, I might need your help remembering this one. So there's a game called Resistance, which is a social deception game. The idea is you are all on a strike team that's going to perform a mission, but several of you on the team are actually traitors. And the goal is the traitors are trying to fail the mission without getting caught as the saboteurs, essentially. So I recommend this one in the sense of, I think it's going to capture that social element that you're kind of looking for there, Chad, as well as the fact that it requires minimal components. You're going to have one or two things that you have to put on the table in front of you. One is like a face down card. The other is just a little token that you have to indicate that you've done something. So you can go to your dive bar and you're not going to lose a whole bunch of important pieces to your game because there's only one or two things you need to worry about. So that's the kind of stuff I would look for is, it's a great point of where are you going to play this? If it's at home, there's different games I would recommend because they're going to be on your dining room table where you can keep the stuff clean and you won't lose anything. So you can have more out there. If you're going and bringing this to places, you want to keep it simple. You want a box that's, this big so that you're not losing all your stuff. So Resistance is one I would start with. Lexi, if you're familiar, there's an offshoot of Resistance. I am just forgetting the name of it. Coup is the name of it. Coup. That is an excellent social game as well. Again, minimal componentry. And the basic premise of both of these games is designed to just get you to start yelling at your friends. Because no one trusts each other. You're all screaming because you think you know who the saboteur is, but you're always wrong. It's always the quietest person. And it can legitimately cause fights, which I absolutely love. It's my favorite type of game to play because I love the social fights. And so that's what I would recommend if that's the spirit you're trying to capture.
So I got two things to comment on. One, that information makes me want to double down on Onitama. Very much a bring with you to a bar or
Onitama.
Onotime.
Oh.
Very easy to teach to a stranger and have a good time with. But then the second thing I would look into are a genre of games called roll and writes. A lot of times they come with like a little pad with a whole bunch of sheets and then little rule book and a couple of dice, little pencils, and it's usually rolling and having to make certain patterns. A lot of times big board games will have like a little roll and write version, like a little spin-off that you can just bring with you very easily.
Sounds a bit like Yahtzee.
Yeah, I mean, in a way. For example, there's one we have that's called King Domino, where it's kind of like dominoes, but you have to like put types of land and crowns, and you end up multiplying the number of crowns of land. So it's like this domino type thing. But we have the roll and write version of King Domino. So instead, you roll two dice, and it gives you like the two halves of the domino, and then you just write them in on the grid. So
Interesting.
King Domino. Sorry, Lex, go ahead.
Yeah, that's basically the end of it. It's basically King Domino, but really tiny with a couple of dice, and you can just play it on the go.
King Domino is, I wish I would have thought of this earlier. That is one of my gateway games for people. It is very easy to learn. It's very fun. There are opportunities for you to kind of screw over your opponents by taking a tile that they might want. But generally, the people who are playing that game for the first time, you're just in it for yourself and you're just paying attention to your own board. And so no one gets mad. There's no hurt feelings, but excellent game. It only takes 15, 20 minutes to play when you understand it. Always has been a really big hit. Like every time we get it on the table, people really like that game. So I highly recommend King Domino for anyone looking to kind of enter into this genre.
Yep. Very much in the gateway.
The video games, there's been a trend of making horrible video games from comic books and movies. Happen with the board games? Are they all bad?
You can get great ones, but there is definitely if right now if you make a board game with a Marvel theme on top of it, it'll sell. It doesn't matter if it's good. It can be the worst game you've ever played, but as long as you stick Spider-Man in there.
Or if it's a game I already like and then their Marvel version drops, I can replace it with the Marvel version.
Yeah. Yep.
We have one called Love Letter. It's a very simple card game. You get like two cards and then you just kind of do a little social deception type stuff and you draw through the deck and it's very simple. But they came out with a Marvel version of it and I'm like, well, it's such a cooler theme. I got to get that.
Yeah.
So have you ever thought about starting a Kickstarter and making your own games?
Easier said
I'll
than
never
done.
do it.
There's kind of like a bit of a taboo or like a guess people have that who knows if it's really true, but a lot of people think that these big board gaming companies are using Kickstarter money they earn to fund their previous project as opposed to like the next one, the ones that they're actually advertising. It's like, it makes sense, because in order to launch a Kickstarter campaign, you basically have to have the game done. Like you have all these pictures and the mechanics and how it's going to go. So you already put a lot of work into it just to put that out there. But like I don't have the time or the funds to almost fully complete a game before asking for money for it. It's just not on the cards for me. But maybe one day it'll be my retirement.
And manufacturing is challenged too, right?
Yeah.
Finding
everything comes from China.
There is a pretty substantial hurdle to really getting in on this industry too. So we have local in Minnesota, they're based in Roseville. We have a company called Fantasy Flight Games. They are one of the top manufacturers, if not the top. I believe they were the most prolific game company in North America, and they are now owned by Asmodee, which is the biggest global company that works with these games. So Fantasy Flight Games has been here for a long time. They make some of the best games that are out there, in my opinion. I know several people who work out at that company, including some of the game designers. And I mean, these guys give pitches on new games all the time, and almost nothing really gets through because it is very hard to crack into this industry. It's the profit margins on, a box with a whole bunch of custom printed and manufactured components is not big because they can't sell these games for $200 most of the time. You're talking roughly $50, $60 is kind of the most that most people are going to want to pay for a board game ever. And there isn't a lot of money to be found there. So it's really hard. And I can't imagine trying to do it without the support of a company that already knows what they're doing. Obviously, people have done it. I mean, there have been incredibly successful Kickstarter campaigns for some of these amazing games that we now have because someone was gutsier and more courageous than me. But and thank God we have them. But I just can't imagine. I can't imagine the time and the stress that would take to make that be a success. So I will never attempt it.
So before we get too far toward the end, interesting thing that you guys talked about the other day and always fascinates me is these legacy games, these games that people wreck, ruin, destroy, build up, change. They're just amazing. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so a legacy game, kind of want to summarize it, is the idea that it's a game that you'll play over multiple sessions. So you'll play it more than one time, but as you progress through the game, you are actually living out a story that the game has provided, and you are making permanent alterations to the game. This can be done by attaching stickers to the board itself, putting stickers on cards. Sometimes it's destroying components. You are ripping up a card, or if you're playing a game where you have character cards, you're playing as a character. If that character dies, you will literally rip up the card and they're gone. You cannot use that character for the rest of the game. It feels like a very big hurdle to people, myself included, when I first got started, because they are more expensive. You're probably going to spend $100 minimum on a legacy game. And to think of it as you can only play it once, in the sense of once you have completed that story, it's done. It has been permanently altered. You can't just break it out again. It is one of the best formats to play some of these games that I have ever experienced. A very popular game is that's out there is Pandemic, where you are literally trying to control a global pandemic. Came a little scary a couple years ago, obviously, but they released a legacy version of that game. And it is one, again, where once you have completed it, it's basically done. You can use it as the core game again, but you have to really understand the core game very well to play it that way again. It's very expensive. There's multiple seasons of it at this point, but it is the way to play Pandemic. I can't play the core version of that game anymore because the legacy version is so good. But it requires a time commitment. There's an initial expense. There's a lot of hurdles. But when you really think about it, if you get 4 people who are going to sit down and play Pandemic Legacy, about $100, each of you shells out $25. You are guaranteed to play, I believe, 24 games of Pandemic minimum, and it actually can increase from there. But
so you basically want to get that all figured out ahead of time.
A little bit. Yep.
Yeah. Instead of just buying a game and
sat
then
on my shelf for years till I finally found a group to crack it with. The Pandemic Legacy had one of the best surprise twists I've ever experienced in a board game.
Wait,
Also, before we run out of time, I do want to plug my favorite game of all time for anyone who wants to go try it. It's from Chip Theory Games. They're located here in Plymouth, actually.
Oh, I know what he's going to say.
Too Many Bones.
That's it.
It's amazing. Okay, it's very hard. It's a heavyweight game. And when they talk about weight of a game, that's basically its complex. So heavyweight, complex, but it's very good. It's very fun. Much recommend.
Fun fact about that game is it's incredibly expensive. But part of the reason is that they designed every component in that game to be waterproof. And so you can actually watch a video of two people who sat in a bathtub and played Too Many Bones, and they got all their stuff like soaking wet. And all of they said it took days for some of the stuff to dry out, but it did. And so, yeah, it's a very expensive game, but it's a very immersive and fun game to play. So, yeah, that one's a good one. Find a friend who's interested and just tack onto their
But you don't have to do the bathtub.
You don't have to, but
that's
you
optional.
Also really should. I really think you should.
Any parting thoughts before we shut her down?
I just hope people will come to some of the tabletop community events that we're hosting. We're really eager to teach some games. I know that one of the ones I would like to do, referencing an earlier part of our conversation, I would like to bring in several of the card games that I have come to know over the years, and I would like to teach people those, because there are games like Magic the Gathering, which it can be a very intimidating game to try and get into. There's a lot of rules and a lot of nuance to it to learn. There are very, very simple card games out there as well, like Pokemon. One of the ones I would like to teach is called Star Wars Destiny, where you are playing with the deck of cards, but you're doing a lot of dice rolling. And the game is all about manipulating the dice to your advantage. So it's a very simple game, very fun to play. So yeah, I hope people will join our events, and if there are things you would like to learn, please feel free to throw me a suggestion we have a channel in Slack, or if you want to just send me a message, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, I will commit to come and play Magic the Gathering.
We'll do it.
I'm in on that.
Yeah.
Lex, final thoughts?
Yeah, Brian kind of covered it. I was just going to say, reach out to myself, Lex Ryan, or Brian on Slack if you have any questions or want recommendations or just want to chat about board games, because we are for it.
Mm-hmm.
We are here.
Peter, Chad, anything?
I've never lost a game of cribbage in my life.
Oh,
of course
challenge
not.
Accepted.
It sounds like you should challenge yourself to learn something new.
It sounds like, yeah.
Cribbage is a game my mom will destroy me at. I'll beat her at anything else. We play cribbage and she'll just mop the floor with me.
Oh, man. Really, really getting your butt kicked in cribbage sucks. It's horrible. All right. Well, with that, I think we'll say goodbye, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Solution Design Group is a digital product consultancy in Minneapolis. Check us out on the web at solutiondesign.com or look for us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Solution Design Group.